Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution goes ahead and documents all the powers that Congress has. So what is all the power? They got so much power. They got, okay, they call it enumerated powers. That's just how, the old fucking founders used to talk. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. The Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. The Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes, and to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the U.S. Congress shall have power to coin money, regulate the value thereof in a foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. The Congress shall have power to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the U.S. The Congress shall have power to establish post offices and post roads. The Congress shall have power, post roads, and it's just a road. Why is it a post road? I guess it's because it's like the federal post, a post road to get to the post office, which was usually the center of a small town. The Congress shall have power, more power, to promote the progress of science and useful arts. Wait a second. Trump is denying climate change by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Okay. The Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries and patents, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. Interesting. So under the Supreme Court, there's inferior tribunals. The Congress has the power to constitute them. The Congress shall have the power to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. So now it's saying to define and punish piracies and felonies. To declare war. This is confusing, and I'm being tweeted at. Quit tweeting me! To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Something about, naval laws. So the Congress has the power to go ahead and punish pirates and felons on the high. Article 1, Section 8 defines all the powers of the U.S. Congress. I'm still about 3/5 of the way down here. And now Article 8, right? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. I'm going to say it again because it's important. Article 1, Section 8 is the powers of Congress. And then Clause 11 says that the Congress shall have power to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. So if you capture somebody on land or on water, if you have letters of marque and reprisal to give a ship the ability to go after pirates so they could declare war in order to repel an invasion right there on the spot, you don't have to get the Congress to declare the war. Congress can give letters of marque and reprisal. It's spelled like, the French spell it, marque and reprisal. And it comes from that the government gives the naval ship, they give the naval ship permission to go, attack whoever. If they get attacked, then they can return the attack. Some ships have that letters of marque and reprisal, completely different than a pirate. Pirates who just, go around to get the plunder for themselves. A letter of marque is official, a state official document that says if they need to declare war while they're out on the high seas, getting the slaves from the Africa, right? This was written during the time of slavery. President Washington was a big slave owner. But all those things together, that entire sentence, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. That is all military stuff. So declare war. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says that the Congress shall have the power to declare war, to declare war. We're going to talk about why they say just declare. Not to make war, not to create war, they declare it. They say when war is happening, it only can come from Congress to declare war. And then it takes, the commander-in-chief can go from there. But if he don't have permission to go to war, the commander-in-chief can't do shit. Look at that sentence. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. And so therefore, it should be Congress that decides Guantanamo Bay. But if you look at that whole sentence, they can declare war, and they get to do war stuff. They get to give little papers, to the ships, so they declare war on the seas. And then when they're captured, whoever's captured on land or water, then they get to make those rules too. So the Congress declares more military stuff. The Congress shall have the power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for longer term than 2 years. Only 2 years, because we don't want a standing army, right? To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. Well, shit, that's another fucking clause that the United States government doesn't listen to. You can only appropriate for 2 years. To provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. So again, making rules for the military. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. So call the militia, the National Guard, deputize whoever they need to deputize. We got to execute the laws of the Union. Suppress insurrections, right? In case the slaves rebel, in case you have, Native Americans rebel. So any insurrection, Shays Rebellion, make sure you squash that, the Whiskey Rebellion, make sure the people never rebel. So the Congress calls forth, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 square miles as may by cessation of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, again with more military stuff, to organize, arm, and discipline the militia. And then it says to exclusive legislative cases and whatsoever. So basically where they're going to decide where the capital is going to go. And then around the capital, they're going to have magazines, forts, arsenals, dockyards, the Pentagon. Even though they don't have any surveillance videotape for some reason. Hey, why don't y'all get some fucking surveillance video? And to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or any department or officer thereof. So, to make all laws which may be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution. And this is where all laws spring out of. All laws come out of the Constitution. Not only has our U.S. government for the last 50 to 70 years been ignoring Clause 11, it says that there's no specific way. Everybody that tries to get out of that, Congress declares the wars. Anybody that tries to get away from that, well, we had the authorization to use force, not a declaration of war, okay? It's some fucking bullshit. It's almost like, you had your fingers crossed. No, it's not a deal. I had my fingers crossed. No, when we say we declare the wars, what we meant to say was the president can declare something that's like a war, but it's not really a war and does as the fuck as he please, and then we as the Congress, a bunch of, weak ass, you have all the power. Congress has all the fucking power. Congress has the power to declare the war. And then we also passed the federal statute, the War Powers Resolution, that says that we, after 2 days, if you got some emergency bombing, bomb, but then you got 2 days to tell, the leaders of Congress what you're doing. And then Congress can vote for your invasion 60 days later. If they don't vote for it, then 30 days, they withdraw and they come home. War Powers Act of 1973. So in conjunction with the War Powers Clause and the War Power of 1973, I would even go so far, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be longer term for than 2 years. So I wonder if that's why they vote on those appropriation bills, because every 2 years they got to just sign it and then you have a new appropriations. So I don't know that, I don't think we're doing that. I don't think we're really doing any of this stuff, but, you know, what can you do? My main point here is when it comes to the Second Amendment, it says that you have a right to bear arms, a well-regulated militia. So the question is, do we have a right to own guns as individuals, or do we have to be part of a well-regulated militia? Do we have to be organized in, you know, different formations out on the street, and then you can have a gun? There's room for debate there. There's no room for debate with the declaration of war. Something interesting, John McCain and Tim Kaine had actually tried to repeal the War Powers Resolution and try to give it with more, get something in there with more teeth, since these presidents continue to skirt the War Powers Resolution. And John McCain points out that Congress has not formally declared any of these wars that we've been engaged in since June 1942, which means they are in violation with the U.S. Constitution, with domestic law. This is a federal statute that we're talking about, the War Powers Resolution, but the War Powers Clause is constitutional. It's in the base of laws. It's in the kernel of all laws in the United States. And so the War Powers Resolution was passed over Nixon's veto during the Vietnam era in 1973. But the U.S. has been involved in several military actions without any real effect from the resolution. Clinton kind of abided by it, but not. April 6, 2017, the United States launched 59 BGM-109 Tomahawk missiles, which helps Raytheon stock and everybody who owns Raytheon, at the Shayrat Air Base in Syria in response to Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons. Senator Rand Paul stated that the United States was not attacked, and that the President needs congressional authorization for military action as required by the Constitution, of which he is 100% correct. Constitutional scholar and law professor Stephen Vladek has noted that the strike potentially violates the War Powers Resolution. Well, here's the War Powers Resolution. You got 2 days in order to tell Congress what you just did. So you got 2 days after the attack, then he tells Congress, and then after 60 days, the imperative is on Congress. Congress either has to declare the war to be okay or to make a non-declaration. 60 days it is up to Rand Paul. Rand Paul, you're going to sit there and say that it's illegal, and I think that you're correct, but it's illegal because Rand Paul, you didn't authorize or deauthorize it. After 60 days, it is up to the Congress. Congress, you need to decide whether or not these wars are good or not. Without that authorization, he's got no permission doing any of this shit. Obama tried to get his own authorization to use force. When he failed to get it, he just said, I'll use W's. And that's what he's using right now. Trump is. I'm going with W's authorization to use force. That was right after 9/11. That was an authorization of force to go against terror. And we've got bin Laden, so it was all about 9/11. So, are we going to, this is a perpetual war to the end of all time? Then why the fuck did all you assholes vote for it? Huh? Bernie Sanders, why the fuck would you vote for endless war for W, but not for Obama? Like, it makes no sense. You're saving face, but he used the same authorization. War Powers Clause is important about who initiates the war, who starts the war. And Abraham Lincoln had pointed out that it was James Madison. They had said something about, well, what if the president needs to make immediate action? If he's got to make immediate action, that's why they only gave the power to declare war to Congress. So once Congress declared the war, then that gives the president permission to go to war with whoever as immediately as possible. And then the War Powers Resolution gave the president 2 days. 2 days emergency war powers, and then after the 2 days you must notify the leaders of Congress, the head of, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, or the pro tempore, whatever that other fucker is. And so the leaders of the Senate, leaders of the House need to be notified by the President, and then 60 days later it would come up for, either Section 8, Clause 11 gives Congress the power to declare war, clear and clear. There's 3 other times that they mentioned war. In Article 1, the legislative branch, Section 10, the powers prohibited of states. So it says, no state, Clause 3, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in times of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state, or with a foreign power engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So therefore they could defend themselves if they're being invaded, but states, so Colorado and Georgia and Kentucky and Maine and California, they cannot declare war, they cannot tax tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in times of peace, enter into any agreement or compact. 1 Section 10, Clause 3 is important because it says that the states cannot engage in war. So Congress declares the war, and yet they're saying states do not engage it. So they're very specific with their language. To engage in war is to engage in all the conduct. And I think that the conduct of the war is shared between the president and Congress. There's many powers that Congress has that helps them, they make rules concerning the captures on land and water. So prisoners of war, the rules are going to be written by Congress. And then they grant letters of marque and reprisal, which gives ships and basically it gives like what, Trump is doing with the generals, just saying you have a letter of marque and reprisal. If you feel the need to declare war, if you're, hanging around Somalia and you get attacked, now that general has the ability to just go ahead and declare war for us, for the American people in Somalia or the 20 other places where they are involved with the military. They provide and maintain a Navy, okay? So I would think that the uniform code for the Navy, they raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money that shall be used for a term longer than 2 years. They make rules for the government and the regulation of the land and naval forces. So they make rules for the land and navy, so for the Army, for the Marines, for the Navy. Congress is writing all these rules. They provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repeal invasions. So actually, if Congress wants to declare war against its own people, then they can call up the military in order to do so. So this is all the duties of, what the power, who has the power to conduct war, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. All this is Article 1, Section 8. The authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So Congress is disciplining them. They are writing the rules for them. They're raising the Army, raising the Marines, raising the Air Force, raising the Navy, raising all these armed forces. They can call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. That's the power of Congress. This is all the power of Congress. They can also define and punish piracies, felonies committed on the high seas, and offenses against the law of nations. So they can, define and punish piracy and felonies committed on the high seas. So basically you can have little tribunals out on the seas because, the U.S. controls all the seas. The other time where the war is mentioned is Article 3, Section 3. And this has to do with treason. This is Article 3, the judicial branch. Section 3, treason. Now, defining treason is very important when it comes to the impeachment of the president. There's 4 things that they can be impeached for. And one of them is bribery. And then the other one is high crimes. And then the other one is misdemeanors. And then I forget the 4th one. But those, high crimes and misdemeanors and treason and bribery. Okay, right? High crimes and misdemeanors, treason and bribery. Those are the 4 ways you could get impeached. So misdemeanors, I don't know how many times you got to, get convicted of shoplifting and jaywalking in order, well, he had 2 misdemeanors. Is that it? As soon as you jaywalk twice, right, ticket him 2 misdemeanors, you could impeach the president. I think actually if you get the indictment, then it would be based on, is he guilty of this or is he not guilty of this? And they might not vote in favor of him being guilty of the misdemeanor of jaywalking, but, just because they don't want to get him impeached. Against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. Okay. Corruption of blood, attainted, the Congress has power to declare the punishment of treason. And then you have to figure out the rest of those words yourselves. But it mentions levying war. So if you're treasonous, if you declare war against your government, if you declare war against the United States, or if you adhere to their enemies. If you have ISIS, in your bedroom, if you're giving aid and comfort to ISIS or Al-Qaeda, then you are also guilty of engage in war. The states cannot engage in war ever for any reason except for in their own self-defense. And the states cannot engage in war, and then you will be guilty of treason if you levy war against the United States or give aid and comfort to the enemies. So levying war, engaging in war, declaring war, okay? They understand the difference between conducting and engaging and levying and declaring. It is important for them who initiates the war? Only Congress. And so that means if you're bombing in another country, what you're doing is illegal. It goes against the U.S. Constitution. The Supreme Court was too big of fucking pansies during the Vietnam era to ever take this issue on. They said it was political. Fucking news shocker there. It's all political, you stupid motherfuckers. It's against a specific reason why you would declare war. That's what makes us the good guys, right? We're not going around having all these little secret wars, like 20 wars in Africa, right? We're not going to have these secret wars. We declare it officially, so that way they know what's going on, and we list the reasons, so that way the enemy can remedy the reasons. You got, whatever reason, right, Saddam Hussein was told to let the inspectors check out his country, which he said that he was, up for. So anyways, that was the reasons that was listed. It was also King George's, his excesses and his brutality. They list the reasons for why war was declared. And then this is according to Grotius, according to heritage.org, gave notice of the legal grounds for war and the opportunity for enemy nations to make amends and thereby avoid the scourge of war. It served notice on the enemy's allies that they would be regarded as co-belligerents and their shipping subject to capture. Declaration of war, one's own navy and privateers cannot be treated as pirates by the enemy, but on the other hand, one's own citizens were subject to prosecution if they dealt with the enemy. Furthermore, under previous practice, declarations of war triggered other legal actions such as the internment or expulsion of enemy aliens, the breaking of diplomatic relations, and the confiscation of the enemy's property. So in short, the power to declare war was designed as a power to effect legal rights and duties in times of hostilities. So I think that's very important. That's very important to understand. So the reason why we declare war is so that way there is legal justification. There's legal justification not only for the war, but also the conduct of everybody that's engaged with the war. And so when you declare war, then you also, you can, round up a bunch of people and take the property. Well, you can't just steal people's property right now unless you're in war. There have only been 5 congressionally declared wars in the history of the United States. First is the War of 1812, which was in a preemptive strike trying to take over Canada. Then you had the Mexican-American War of 1846, Spanish-American War of 1898, World War I, and World War II. Those are the 5 wars that we have actually officially declared. We actually listened to the Constitution, and Congress was the one that declared the war, and then once Congress declared the war, then the President became the Commander-in-Chief. And he's got the Commander-in-Chief, so he's got a whole array of powers, except for the specific powers that I had mentioned that enumerated those powers, enshrined those powers to Congress, to the U.S. Congress, to the Senate, and to the House of Representatives, to the 100 senators, and to the 435 House of Representatives. Notably, those declarations were accompanied yes, the good old days. The good old days when Congress used to declare war. So, Mexican-American War, we were lied into. World War I, what the fuck was that even about? We're just gassing everybody to death. A lot of people fucking died for no reason. Because Serbia. Because there was an assassination of the Austrian-Hungarian Archduke. And then the alliance systems, and then we just wanted to jump in. And then the War of 1812, we tried to take over Canada, Mexican-American War, the Spot Amendments, where the hell was it, right? We actually invaded, and then we said, hey, they shot back after we invaded, and then we took, half of Mexico, so. And then World War II. World War II, we killed a bunch of Nazis. Good job, World War II. Good job, Civil War. American Revolution, I'm 50-50 on you. All these other fucking wars, fuck you, okay? So the quasi-war with France in 1798 wasn't authorized by Congress. War against Tripoli, Libya in 1802. They're statutorily authorized but not accompanied by a formal declaration. And quasi-war with France in 1798, Iraq in 1991 and 2002, and then against the perpetrators of the September 11th, 2001 attacks. None of those had a formal declaration of war. So if this is an argument, that's like an excuse, right? Everybody else jumped off a bridge, you could do it too. But there were 5 that was authorized. So what the fuck is going on here, huh? What the fuck is going on? Basically, they're saying that shit has changed because we've institutionalized the military. Before, we didn't have standing armies, but after World War II, now we have an institutionalized standing army. And they're trying to say that that's why the president needs more power. That he don't need more power with a standing army. He needs less power with a Supreme Court has never intervened to stop a war that a president has started without congressional authorization. The Supreme Court are a bunch of weak fucking assholes. I mean, why would they not? This is a constitutional question. This is totally constitutional. The Congress has the power to declare wars. We're bombing nations that the Congress didn't say was okay. So that's fuck the Congress because you're not doing your damn duty. Fuck the president. You know, the people who's in these positions who's conducting illegal wars in my name. You're bombing all these children in Syria. I didn't give you permission. The Congress didn't give you permission. The United Nations didn't give you permission. You're just bombing the whole fucking world whenever the fuck you feel like it. And that's supposed to help the terrorism? That's supposed to take terrorism down? That's supposed to make me safer? That don't make me safer. That makes the world more dangerous. We're creating more terrorists, you know? Just like when Ronald Reagan targeted Nelson Mandela, called him a terrorist, and then give Bin Laden his weapons. How many more Nelson Mandelas are we killing? The conventions of 1949 guarantee various enumerated rights to lawful combatants, prisoners of war, and civilians, explicitly apply to all armed conflicts between contracting nations, not just to declared wars. Congress's power to declare war continues to have important statutory ramifications. Nonetheless, a particularly dramatic example is the Alien Enemy Act, which is 1798. Old-ass law. old-ass law. But it supposedly authorizes the president to detain and deport citizens of enemy nations, but only following either a declaration of war or an attack upon the United States. So, authorizes them to detain and deport citizens of enemy nations without a declaration of war. That's, you know, the Alien Enemy Act is null and void. Now, the attack upon the United States, it would be the immediate attack, not a days of fighting sale. A letter of marque and reprisal was a government license authorizing a person known as a privateer to attack and capture enemy vessels and bring them before admiralty courts for condemnation and sale. Cruising for prizes with a letter of marque was considered an honorable calling combining patriotism and profit, in contrast to unlicensed piracy, which was universally reviled. In addition to the late letter de marque, the French sometimes used the term letter de course for their letters of marque. Letter of marque was sometimes used to describe the vessel used. A letter of marque generally refers to a lumbering, square-rigged cargo carrier that might pick up a prize if the opportunity arose. A privateer was a fast and weatherly fore and aft rigged vessel, heavily armed and heavily crewed, intended exclusively for fighting. A letter of marque and reprisal would include permission to cross an international border to effect a reprisal, to take some action against an attack or injury. The terrorists were compared to pirates after 9/11, and Ron Paul, he tried to get the issue of marque and reprisal re-raised. In order to stop warring against a foreign nation, he wanted to just go ahead and authorize small groups of people, you know, use letters of marque and reprisal against the specific terrorist instead of warring against a foreign country. So it's a decentralized network. Al-Qaeda, there is no country for Al-Qaeda. And so that's why we have to go after them like crap goes through a goose. Get the so-called bad guys or whatever, let the country establish their own laws and, you know, own rules. We're not there to occupy, we're there to do some good, and then we're getting the, you know, hell out of Dodge unless they give us permission so we can have our U.S. embassy there. We want to be a favored, you know, trading nation with the United States. We convinced them to, you know, let us build, you know, put our shops and our embassies and what have you. Article 2, Section 2. Article 2, Section 2. The President shall be commander. So Article 2, this is in, you know, the Congress, powers of the Congress is in Article 1. They get to declare the war, and then they're mentioning the president in Article 2 later on. Congress gets to declare the fucking war. That's exactly the words, that's exactly the definition, that's exactly the intent of the founders. Even if it's a living, breathing fucking document, it's still the fucking point. It's still the point. You have to have some sort of check. You know, the president just wants to go, attack that guy. Hey, there's a guy out there. I think he might be a terrorist. I'm going to declare war on him. Before he does it, you got to go, hey, Congress. Hey, Mitch, right, leader of this fucking Senate, and then whoever the leader of the House is that Paul Ryan? Hey, Paul Ryan. Hey, Mitch, can I go attack that guy? Yeah, sure. Now he goes attacks him. It's not much of a check, but it's a check nonetheless. Section 2, the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states. When called into the actual service of the United States, he may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of the respective offices, and he shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the U.S., except in cases of impeachment. He shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and he shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointment are not herein otherwise provided for, which shall be established by law. But the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think. The President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and the Navy, and it would be of the air too, right? The land, the sea military, and the air military, and of the militia of the several states. So the militia of the states, the National Guard, right? When called into the actual service of the U.S. And then it's semicolon. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments. Okay, so just let's go back to that, Clause 1. President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the U.S. and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the U.S. When called into the actual service of the U.S. This fucking document is so goddamn clear. Yeah, the Congress has to declare war. If Congress doesn't declare war and they allow the president to get away with their fucking crime, Congress is not doing their duties, and nor is the president. Both are in contempt of the law. Both are illegal. Quick recap, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the U.S. Constitution grants Congress the power to declare the war. The President gets the power to direct the military after that declaration has been given with the powers granted to him from Article 2, Section 2, which names him the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces when he needs it, okay, when it's been authorized. When it's been authorized, then he gets to control the military. The president cannot declare the war. The president cannot control the military without a declaration of war. Without a declaration of war from Congress, it's illegal. And it's not good fucking policy. The reason why you would declare an official war is to give the enemies, here's what you can do in order to not be bombed, okay? And if they, do those things, then we don't have to go to war, right? So if we're being proper, it's like when a police officer goes around. They have sirens and they got the uniform. Right? When the police officers do what they do, it's okay that they do what they do if they're, clearly marked, I'm an officer of the law, here's my police car, here's my badge, here's my uniform. Now, if they're just going around like this in a T-shirt, right, attacking people, well, that's bullshit. That's some bullshit. Who authorized you to do that? Well, the prosecutor's just going to cover my ass anyways, since we got rogue militia for police here in the U.S. So that's just exactly what we're saying with this. If the president can just declare war and bomb whoever the fuck he wants to bomb without Congress, without any check, without anybody telling him no, that means he can drop a fucking nuke. Right now, if Donald Trump, he asked several times, are we going to drop nukes? Why don't we ever use our nukes? He asked that several times with Chris Matthews, and how many times did he say that? Why do we have them? Why do we have them? If we have nukes, why do we have them? And then presidents all the time, all options are on the table. All it takes is for them to just push apparently some kind of protocol that it's in one person's hands and then another, so like two people have to turn the key or some shit. But that's just an internal military thing. When it actually comes down to the president, Donald J. Trump, he has the war powers. He's got unlimited war powers. War powers has been used It was used for prohibition. They passed a federal statute that got rid of alcohol, that prohibited the use of alcohol because of the war. Well, we got the war going on. You can't be getting drunk when there's a war going on. You got to work. You got to contribute to the war effort. What the hell are you doing? Go get a job. Go get, get this economy moving. And you cannot have alcohol. So they used the war powers for that. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus when he went and arrested a bunch of state legislatures and governors and shit out of Maryland. And so when you have war powers, they break the Constitution and be like, hey, I'm at war, guy. What can I do? Dumbasses, some dumb motherfuckers think that Article 2, Section 2 actually says that since he's the commander-in-chief, he's got special powers, and he can declare war whenever the fuck he feels like it. He don't need the declaration of war from Congress. He's the commander-in-chief. He just gets to declare fucking wars. That's bullshit. That's such bullshit. The president doesn't have that power, and it also doesn't provide how far the president can go. So I think that it's bullshit. The founders, they're saying the founders gave the president the title to preserve civilian supremacy over the military, not to provide additional powers outside of congressional authorization certificate. Sorry about that. But after the Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon administrations had spent nearly a decade committing U.S. troops to Southeast Asia without congressional approval, Congress responded by passing the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which requires the president to communicate to Congress whenever there's a committal of troops. Philip Bobbitt, was that Lorena's husband? Philip Bobbitt, he's weighing in. And Philip Bobbitt, he says that the framers of the Constitution believed that statutory authorization was the route by which the U.S. could commit to war, and then it showed the history of the quasi-war with France. So, they authorized it, but it wasn't an official declaration. According to Mr. Bobbitt, he says that the declaration for war is only for total war. Total war? Shut the fuck up. You're dropping bombs in a sovereign nation that's a goddamn war. Shit. It's so stupid. It's only for total wars, not for the whole war. Shut the fuck up. It's for any and all war. Okay? Any and all war is bullshit. We got to put it into war. War is going to put it into us. Now, to stop imperialism, to stop colonization, to stop genocide, to stop ISIS, for revolution, these are the only times that we should be engaged in any kind of violence. Fuck war. Fuck all war. The point of the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which Congress had a supermajority, overrode, Nixon's veto, which of course, where he's running Vietnam, he don't want to be told what to do, but Congress is the one that controls, the war, to declare the war. And they also they maintain a Navy, they also maintain the Army, they raise and support the Army, they have the discipline for the Army, so it becomes the regular Army. So even though the president is authorized as commander-in-chief, he only gets this power once war has been declared. War has not been declared. Now, if these authorization to use forces is going to be the authorization for war, fuck that. That is not obvious. That is not, on its fucking face. And call it what it actually is. Call it what it actually is. It's the Iraq War. It's the Iraq War. And Hillary Clinton voted for it, right? She voted for the authorization to use force for Iraq. Bernie voted for the war on terror, the authorization to use force against terror. I wanted to basically point out that constitutional balance that is already in the Constitution. It's already there. It's already there. Congress is explicitly granted the sole authority. They're the only people that declare war. And then they also make rules for the government, regulation of land and naval forces. They control the funding to those same forces. And then the executive has inherent executive authority as the commander-in-chief. Only if Congress says it's okay. That's it. That's it. So the War Powers Resolution, I think, is a good one of 1793. They just haven't been listening to it, and I'd like to actually take a gander at John McCain and Tim Kaine's new War Powers Resolution. Apparently, they're getting permission first. You can't bomb anybody until you consult with Congress first. And even just Congress, just the two leaders of Congress, that's it. No, all Congress, every single fucking 400 in the voice of Abraham Lincoln. The provision of the Constitution, given the war-making power to Congress, was dictated, as I understand, by the following reasons. Kings had always been involving and impoverishing their people in wars, pretending generally, if not always, that the good of the people was the object. This our convention understood to be the most oppressive of all kingly oppressions, and they resolved to so frame the Constitution that no one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. But your view destroys the whole matter and places our president where kings have always stood. Then Congress, member Lincoln, moved for a resolution issuing the president interrogatories questions so that Congress could determine for itself the exact spot. This is Polk in the Mexican-American War. And whether the Congress believed that, what if the president had to repel a sudden attack? This was contemplated by the framers of the Constitution. If the president has to repel a sudden attack, that's why the wording of the proposed Constitution was changed. It first said, make war. This is during August of the summer of 1787. It said that the Congress could make war. So all the war powers was going to go into Congress. This was changed to declare war, specifically in order to allow the president to defend the country from sudden attacks. Mr. Madison and Mr. Gary moved to insert declare, striking out make war, leaving to the executive the power to repel sudden attacks. And that's on Wikipedia 7, according to the Farrand Records 317. The Farrand Records 317. Okay? So they struck out make war, and they said that Congress can declare war. Congress declares the fucking war. That's my point. You have Vattel, for example, wrote in the Law of Nations 1758 that when one nation takes up arms against another, she from that moment declares herself an enemy to all individuals of the latter. Listen to that. When one nation not attacks, not kills, not bombs, but when one nation takes up arms, when they pick up guns in order to invade, that is when she from that moment declares herself an enemy to all individuals of the latter. And so taking up arms, I think, is actually a very low threshold, but definitely an attack, right? Definitely an attack, a bombing, an airstrike, an invasion. Hell, Dylan Roof killed, 7, 9 black folks in the church. Then all black people, since he said he shot them because they were black, should definitely feel that Dylan Roof is against their nation. All black people should, that's what Dylan Roof was saying. As soon as he attacked, Clause 11 is the declare war. Congress shall have the power to declare war clause, plus grant letters of marque and reprisal and make rules concerning captures on land and water. But the one right before that, Clause 10, right, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10, it says to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Well, we just read that Vattel, 1758, was the author of the Law of Nations, and he said that when one nation picks up arms to invade and attack another nation is when the other nation should assume that the other nation wants to declare war on them. So nations and countries, can be two different things. You got the Jewish nation and the black nation, but then you also have the American nation, right? Those people who consider themselves Americans. The Colorado nation. Kentucky, you have the Big Blue Nation, so the Big Blue Nation in Kentucky. 5 declared wars only, officially. The War of 1812, a bullshit war where we invaded Canada, attacked Britain, killed Tecumseh, the British burned down the White House, and we did get the Star-Spangled Banner out of it, but that's, fucking jingoistic militarism. Mexican War, we were lied into by Polk. And so we went into their territory and they attacked us, and then Polk said, well, we got to take over all of Mexico. Mexico was very young, inexperienced, didn't realize the barbarity of white people, that they would just come into other people's lands and just, take it over by force. We got away with it. And so, with Arizona, New Mexico, maybe even Colorado, a bunch of states in the West became states because we stole Mexicans' land. The land away from the Mexicans, just like we stole this entire country away from the Native Americans. Before the Mexican-American War, there was an official declaration of war by the Congress, official declaration of war by Congress for the War of 1812, an official declaration of war by Congress in the Spanish-American War of 1898, which made us an empire. We got Cuba, the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico out of the deal. I don't know when we got Virgin Islands and Hawaii, but once we had colonies, those are still territories today, right? They're not states. We're an empire. We have territories. We don't have, we should just make them states, just, accept them as citizens of our country, give them the full benefits of citizenship. World War I and World War II. So those are the 5 wars. War of 1812, Mexican War, Spanish-American War, which we were also lied into. The not the Lusitania, but the USS something in Havana, Maine, the USS Maine. We blew it up. It accidentally blew up. So actually, if we want to go back to the Law of Nations, World War I was over some bullshit too. The Lusitanian, the sinking of the Lusitanian, there was arms in that ship. We were giving arms to Britain, and so the Germans had sunk it, with the intentions of thinking that we were a belligerent giving arms to the fucking enemy, right? We weren't even allowed to, Cynthia McKinney wasn't even allowed to give food to Palestine. She wasn't even allowed to give food to Palestine, and yet here we're going to say the USS Lusitania can have weapons and armaments and shit for Britain. How is that not supporting one over the other? According to the Law of Nations, as soon as one nation picks up arms and goes to attack another nation, that's when the war has been declared. World War I was just a bunch of horse shit anyways. There was no real reason for us to even be involved in it. A lot of people died. A lot of people, it really made, had a bad taste in people's mouth after World War I. They hated what the fuck happened. World War II. So War of 1812, Mexican War, Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II are the only 5 wars that have been declared. War of 1812, Mexican War, Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II. But there's been a bunch of other wars, such as the Korean War, the Vietnam War, right? Not since 1942. We haven't declared a war since 1942. So that would be, I guess they're just saying the year after 1941. And what the hell is going on here, right? Why are we allowing the president to declare whatever wars that he wants to declare? That doesn't sound like a civilized nation to me. The Korean War was the first modern example of the U.S. Being taken into war without a formal declaration. I guess that's just a conflict too, the Korean conflict, the Vietnam conflict. And Vietnam actually started over a whole plethora of presidents. Eisenhower started it with just a sprinkling of troops, and then the Bush administration responded to Rasul by permitting detainees to bring their petitions before military tribunals. The Supreme Court again addressed the matter in 2006 when they handed down Hamdan v. Rumsfeld, 548 U.S. 557. The Hamdan opinion held that the president lacks constitutional authority under the Commander-in-Chief Clause to try detainees in military tribunals. You can't try detainees in military tribunals, they said. They said it violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the Geneva Conventions. Furthermore, the court rebuked the government's argument that the AUMF expanded presidential authority. So they said the authorization to use military force did not expand the presidential authority. You only had authorization to use force against terrorism. And the Iraqis, right, the 2002 and 2001 authorization to use forces. Congress responded by passing the detainee treatment. Congress tried to cover the Bush administration's ass up, right? This is remarkable. Look how well the Congress, when the presidency and the Congress works well together, right? Okay, so it's a check, but it's definitely an easy check that can be corrupted, having congressional authority for war. So Congress responded by passing the Detainee Treatment Act, which provides that no court, justice, or judge shall have jurisdiction to hear or consider an application for a writ of habeas corpus filed by an alien detained at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That is so specific. Lakhdar Boumediene, an Algerian citizen, challenged the constitutionality of this statute in Boumediene v. Bush. And again, the Supreme Court struck the Bush administration's policies down for a third time, holding that congressional suspension of habeas corpus requires an explicit suspension of the writ, and that merely stripping the federal courts of jurisdiction does not actually suspend the writ. There's emergency powers that the president has. A claim of emergency powers was at the center of Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus without congressional approval. In 1861, Lincoln claimed that the rebellion created an emergency that permitted him the extraordinary power of unilaterally suspending the writ of habeas corpus. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt similarly invoked emergency powers when he issued an order directing that all Japanese Americans residing on the West Coast be placed into internment camps during World War II. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld this order in Korematsu v. United States. Harry Truman declared the use of emergency powers when he seized private steel mills that failed to produce steel because of a labor strike in 1952. With the Korean War ongoing, Truman asserted that he could not wage war successfully if the economy failed to provide him with the material resources necessary to keep the troops well equipped. The U.S. Supreme